Good morning, everyone. I hope you are fine. In our lecture today, we will start to study some questions for Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Well, in Great Expectations, I will focus on three important points: Bib as a narrator and as a character, social class, and the role of guilt. For today, I will discuss Bib as a narrator and as a character. So, question number one: discuss Bib as both a narrator and a character. How are different aspects of his personality revealed by his telling of his story and by his participation in the story itself? What is the answer of this question? See the next slides. Okay, at first, we need to know that this story, that's to say, the story of the novel, traces his development through the events of his early life. However, his narration, written years after the end of the story, and it is a product of his character as it exists after the events of the story. So, Bib's narration reveals the psychological end point of his development in the novel, and that's what we have called Bildungsroman. For example, as a character, Bib's behavior often reveals only part of the story. For instance, he treats Jo coldly. On the other hand, his manner as a narrator completes the story, as long as his guilt for his poor behavior toward his loved ones endures, even as he writes about his early life years later. What does this mean? This means that Bib as a narrator is a mature person. So his story that traces the development of his character through the events of his early life, in other words, it traces the development of his character in his childhood, is completed by his narration when he is a mature person. That is to say, in his adulthood. That's why Great Expectations is considered to be as a Bildungsroman, because it traces the development of Bib's character from childhood to adulthood. And Bib's narration is the psychological end point of his character's development. So, the important question here is that how does Dickens manipulate Bib's narration? Actually, Dickens manipulates Bib's narration to evoke its subjects effectively and to reinforce some aspects of his character. How is that? See the next diagrams. Now, Bib's narration and its subjects. What is the impact of Bib's narration on its subjects? Of course, Dickens manipulates Bib's narration in order to evoke its subjects effectively. So, Bib's narration is used to evoke its subjects in an effective way. How is that? Bib's childhood is narrated in a much more childlike voice than his adult years. Even though the narrator Bib presumably writes both parts of the story at a single later date. What does this mean? This means that, as we have said, Bib, as a narrator, is a mature person. In spite of that, he wrote his childhood in a childlike voice. Now, Bib's narration and his character. So, what is the impact of Bib's narration on his character? Dickens also uses Bib's narration to reinforce particular aspects of his character that emerge in the course of the novel. So, Bib's narration is also used in order to reinforce particular aspects of Bib's character. Explanation. We know from his action that Bib is somewhat self-centered, but sympathetic at heart to others. Bib's later narration of his relationships with others tend to reflect those qualities. How is that? For example, when Magwitch reveals that he is Bib's benefactor, Bib is disgusted by the convict and describes him sullenly in negative terms. Later on, as his affection for Magwitch grows, the descriptive terms he chooses to apply to the convict become much more positive. So at first, Bib's actions were somewhat self-centered with Magwitch. Later on, he shows his sympathetic nature to him. And this actually shows Bib's maturity. That was the end of our lecture today. The reference is Spark Notes. Next lecture, I will discuss the second important point in great expectations, that is social class. Thank you very much for your time and good luck.